Good morning. Welcome to Market Day Report. We're ready to start trading the day, but before we do, need to find out how we traded in the overnight session. Let's start with the corn market. Now, corn settling 3 consecutive sessions in the red, and look at how we closed out the overnight session December, 454 3/4, down 3 1/4 cents. Let's go to soybeans in the overnight session. November unchanged, 1026 1/2. Soy meal was mixed, and it's been down 3 consecutive sessions. Talking about the daytime trading sessions, soy oil moving higher in the overnight. Now to the wheat market. Chicago, July 2 3/4 cents lower, 547 1/2. Hard red, 3 3/4 lower, 554 1/2. And spring wheat, December contract, penny higher, 644 1/4. Let's go to cotton now in the overnight session. Look at that bounce, 69.95 on the D's, within 2 points of the overnight high, up 124 points. And that may be because some problems with the Indian crop that we're finding out about this week, and then talks of possibly a trade agreement. Let's bring in Brian Hoops, President, Midwest Market Solutions. And Brian, again, looking at kind of where we traded overnight, what can we expect for today?
Hey, good morning, Tony. Yeah, it was pretty exciting overnight. Yesterday afternoon, later in the afternoon, President Trump announced that he would not be firing Jerome Powell, even though he had called him a loser just the day before. And it also indicated that he would be lowering the tariffs against China from 145%. They wouldn't be zero, but they would be much lower than what they currently are. And that kind of got a lot of the markets excited overnight. Now, we've talked on your program about gold possibly reaching $3,500 an ounce. Well, if you look at it this morning, well, yesterday we went to 3509. This morning we're all the way down to 3316. We're almost $200 off of the high that we made yesterday. And a lot of that is because of the stock market moving higher yesterday, gapping higher last night, and moving higher again in the overnight. So traders have been buying the gold, selling the stock market kind of as a safe haven play. They're unwinding that now as we maybe are getting closer to reaching some sort of an agreement with a lot of these countries across the world, not only here in the U.S. And we're seeing strength in the dollar as a result. Dollar gapped higher overnight, came back and filled the gap and still trading higher. And how this relates to grains is, the corn market really did not move much based off the tariffs. Initially it did, but it came back because a lot of our crop is not going to be affected by the tariffs. Only 15% of our corn is exported and subject to tariffs, but it's the soybean crop that had more of those concerns. The soybean crop had a positive reaction overnight due to this announcement, but we're still a long ways away from reaching any type of a trade agreement. But at least looks like there's some positive dialogue or some positive talks in that direction.
Brian, you mentioned the equities. We'll just run through these real quick before we actually open this morning. A little higher on the Dow side. The NASDAQ in the overnight session moving higher. S&P also higher as well. So that's how we start the morning, or prepare to start the morning, with the equities. How about we take a break? We'll come back and we'll look at livestock futures next. Market Day Report continues in a moment. So a higher close yesterday in the cattle market. And how did we finish the session? Well, look at that front month April contract, $211.37. It was 50 cents off the day's high, but look at that, $1.60 higher. June contract, 206.27, was up to 52. Feeder market front month, $1.40 higher, 286.92. And the August at 291.25, up 210. Hog trade. Hogs have been higher 9 consecutive sessions. We'll be going for 10 today with the May contract 92.22, up $1.20. June and July both settled above $100. Let's bring back in Brian Hoops, Midwest Market Solutions. Thoughts on the proteins?
Well, yeah, cattle had a really strong run. Hogs, maybe a surprising run as well. Um, we heard talk earlier in the week Packers were going to cut their kills to prop up their box beef. They did that on Monday, so 100,000 kill was all we had on Monday, and we saw a higher box beef trade, but that didn't last long. They increased their kills back to maybe a more normal level around 122,000 yesterday, and those cutouts turned back lower. We have real negative margins, about $134 a head in the red. I don't look for the Packers to pay up again this week like they did last week. Now, the future is suggesting that they're going to have to pay maybe $1 to $2 higher, but if they cut those kills, they can afford not to pay up and maybe carry some of those cattle over into next week's show list. So it's kind of going to be a standoff, I think, this week. I don't know that that cash trade comes as easy as what it did in the last week or so. Packers, I think, are going to try and continue to cut these kills and give them margins back and increase those box beef. Hog weights came out this morning. They were just a few tenths of a pound heavier than a week ago, but they are 4.3 pounds heavier than last year. And last year we had heavy carcass weights. We were talking about it this time last year, about 287 pounds or so. They're over 291 pounds this year. So some very heavy weights, but the market, I think, is looking ahead at possibility that we're going to have a trade agreement with China. And of course, China is a very important customer for our pork exports.
Hey, Brian, before we go quickly, crude oil. Again, hanging above the $60 level. I think we're a little higher. Oh, no, we're a little lower this morning, down nearly a $0.50 here. Final thoughts on crude?
We rallied overnight into some rock solid resistance, getting close to a 78% retracement level. We're above the 62, but ran into some old support, broken support. Now it's acts as resistance. We're pulling back from that area, almost $1.50 from that area. And I think the market last night rallied on optimism again because maybe we'll reach an agreement with China. But I think we're a long ways away from reaching that agreement. But President Trump has indicated they've had some positive discussions, and that's what initially rallied our markets last night.
Perfect. Brian Hoops, Midwest Market Solutions. We'll see you back here tomorrow. You know, we talk crude oil as an important component for gasoline because we use that to drive cars, right?